Woods, Elucid, Armand, Hammer, they've been at this shit for so many years at this point, to the point where I think some people who have only gotten into both of their respective discographies recently and also their collaborative discographies recently probably don't quite know how long they've been at this for. Billy and Elucid have been grinding for so long, and they are prolific too, particularly with albums. They don't really slow down. They had an album out last year, they got one this year. Their solo work is never slowing down either. It's insane. It's kind of crazy. To the point where I probably would be cynical and say slow down a little bit, because most artists who do put out a lot of music in a short period of time tend to get told to slow down, and the music quality isn't always up to par, up to scratch. But, you know, it depends on the artist, doesn't it? I suppose if you're a big fan of both of these names, Elucid, Billy Woods, and then their collaborative works, you're probably not going to care all that much, are you? If you love everything they put out, you're not going to say slow down if the quality's already at a level. Personally, not the biggest fan of every Armand Hammer release. That's just how I feel. But this new one, Haram, is produced by Alchemist, which was something that was interesting for me going into it, because like I say, they do put out a lot of music. Not everyone is a hit for me, so I was like, what are we going to get this time? We got Alchemist on production. Alchemist, by the way, who's been prolific over the past few years, working with Conway, Freddie Gibbs, plenty of other names too. Pretty strong producer, all things considered, really. And I was impressed with what he delivered here with Armand Hammer. I know I just said I'm not the biggest fan of everything they do, but Haram is quite the spectacle. It is quite an event, I think, this time around. There is something about this album that is just hitting harder than anything they seem to have done before. And I've got to say, I do think Alchemist is a big contributor to that. I think his beats are working perfectly with the images and the vivid details that Billy and Elucid tend to work with in their writing. I think these tracks have the exact kind of beat needed to match the intensity, the unsettling lyrics that go along with it. Every track just seems to nail it. And of course, I don't think many people would question Alchemist's ability in being able to do that. I don't think there is anyone out there that would say Alchemist isn't right for this job, because I mean, the proof is really in the pudding. He bloody is. It's constantly unnerving, constantly creepy, reminds me a little bit at times, not in the same kind of hellish way, but the production that Backwash was working with on their debut album from last year. Just something about the production that just always seemed to match the words that Backwash was saying is similar to what is happening here. The very dark and brooding opener really sets the tone. It's not like the most intense beat you're ever going to hear, but I think it's just doing enough to make it feel so sinister in a really Halloween-ish way. And then Billy's lyrics at the start as well, talking about like needing rope and, you know, being on boats, and the angel thing he's talking about. It's all just very, very particular. Like, there's always something in his writing that is just so specific to what he would say, and I think that's what draws people to Billy Woods. He always has a way with words, and I don't know if many other people out there in all genres of music could quite match some of the weird imagery that he conjures up. But then you've got some of the instrumentals on this album that manage to kind of put positive spin on what is going on across the album. Like, a lot of it is quite twisted and demented, but then there's some tracks like Black Sunlight, for example, which has this soulful sample coming through that reminds me of something like Little Brother would do, which I never thought I'd mention Little Brother in an Armand Hammer review. I don't know how that managed to happen, but it just somehow makes sense and works. And it's not only because they're both hip-hop duos, it is just something that I feel like Little Brother would rap over. It's positive, uplifting, weirdly inspiring as well. I love this instrumental, and only, again, you'd only get this really from the Alchemist, this variety of different beats on one album. Indian Summer is exactly what it says. Like, it really feels like you're just sweating and walking through the most muggy and dirty and just absolutely like dehydrated desert you've ever come across. I mean, most deserts are like that anyway, but something about it just feels so sluggish and tiring. And I think it matches some of the lyrical themes on this album, that kind of like exhausted feeling that is coming across with Billy and Elucid's lyrics. God's Feet again, Alchemist capturing that grim darkness that I think is what Billy and Elucid are essentially setting out to achieve, which I think they've done it before on previous albums, but I think sometimes the production isn't quite hitting in the way that I want it to, especially with Shrines. There was moments on the album that I just couldn't get with the beats and the instrumentals all that much, but I think Alchemist is kind of like fine-tuning them in a way that makes it work for what their rapping styles are meant to be rapping over, if that makes sense. Falling Out the Sky is beautiful as well. Absolutely adore this one. Whenever it comes on, it's an instant an instant whoa moment. Like, that beat is so specific and it is just so gorgeous. Earl comes on here too, doing his thing. Just great verses all around, and a fantastically produced song. What a track that is. I'm throwing up. The thought of it is making me want to throw up. I don't know why. There's some pretty eye-widening and eye-opening lyrics on tracks like Scaffolds as well. I wrote one of the most depressing lyrics, I think, on the whole album, actually. This lyric really stopped me in my tracks when Billy says, "I can't afford not to believe in things unseen, but belief has always been dangerous to me." God damn. The idea of just having belief in anything being dangerous to you is so just scary and depressing. It really matches his entire lyrical theme that he was going for on the album Hiding Places as well. Kind of sad to see that things haven't changed, and then when you kind of pair it with all of the other overarching themes that are coming through on this album, with the police, race in general, it's just kind of all collapsing in on Billy and just his hope for anything, which is why he's saying lines like this. Wishing Bed is quite interesting, with the idea of looking in prisons and sort of taking a deeper look into a prison cell itself and just viewing things from someone who is sat just kind of surrounded by those walls and not being able to go anywhere, and they're just trapped. Billy again saying some pretty interesting lyrics here. I feel quite harsh only mentioning Billy's lyrics, but there is just something about the way he words things that's really poignant all the time. No clocks, they break you till you break rocks. Watch yourself rot in a box. And there's always been a debate, hasn't there, about what prisons should do and what we should be doing with our prison systems. Should it be just throwing people away, not really focusing on rehabilitation, that kind of thing, just letting people essentially just rot in a box? Or should we take a more Scandinavian approach? I think there are Scandinavian prisons that go for more of the rehab sort of idea and tend to treat prisoners in a way that's much nicer and the conditions are much better. It's always been a big debate. Clearly you can see what side of the coin these guys are on this particular track, because the critiques of the system are very strong. Curly Castro has a good verse too. I like his verse, pretty, again, really detailed and vivid with the way he's wording himself here. It's got a pretty good hook, this track too. Just one of those songs that I just find interesting to read into and listen to, and just find the perspectives of the people on board, talking about this topic, just quite interesting. I always find stuff like this very interesting. It's sort of like watching a documentary and kind of seeing the ways in which things work. It's that kind of thing. I just find stuff like that in a nerdy way quite interesting. Speaking of choruses as well, on the track Squeegee, totally reminds me of Mos Def. I don't know if anyone else caught that, but I feel like Mos Def would kind of do that vocal riffing thing that Elucid is doing on this one. I'm a big fan of Mos Def, but that's probably why I'm comparing it to that, because anything that reminds me of that is good for me. Now you've got the track Chicarones, which is one that I was hesitant to get into, because this track, Jesus Christ, lyrically is so thick, proper thick with a C, proper a C, really don't know how to handle this one lyrically. Wow. I don't know, man. Yeah, this one was quite a lot to take in. Not in the way that the last Clipping album was, because some of those lyrics go quite gory and into the very twisted topics that they do about, you know, all of the kind of like horror themes that they go for, which I think is a great album, by the way. But it never quite hits the point where it feels too on the nose. And I think this one with Quelle Chris's verse reaches that level for me personally. I think just all of the references to pigs and, you know, the roasts, well, that's just paraphrasing really. Everything on this, it just feels a bit overboard. Now I get what they're going for here. It doesn't take much of a genius to work out what they're saying with the lyrics, but I just think the way it's handled just feels a bit too sick in this context. I think just a bit too much for me. It's very stomach churning, but I think on the other end of the scale, on the opposite end, you could read into these lyrics and think they're like amazing. So I don't know. It's not that I can't handle things like this, but I think maybe the way they've handled it is just going a bit too far over the cliff. So yeah, definitely not one for me, this one, but I do think the album does end strong with Stonefruit. Really like this one. Once again, I think the chorus is great. I think it's Elucid again doing this chorus, which reminds me of how good he can be good at doing choruses. So I think most of these tracks probably could have done with him on the hook, because he's pretty damn good at it. And with the lyrics on this one, it almost feels like they're descending into madness. Like, it doesn't feel like there's a conclusion to this album. It's almost just what doesn't kill you makes you more insane, essentially. And I just feel like that's what's being captured on this chorus here. But yeah, overall I think this is really good. Probably my favorite Armand Hammer album to date. One of those where I think, like a car, lyrically you're just really blown away and not really understanding everything that's being said. There are just some rappers out there, kind of like a Milo too in that sense. Probably takes like a dozen listens to really bring in and digest everything that's being said. So I can't quite say I'm fully, you know, sold on the theme here, because I'm not sure if I've quite fully grasped everything in terms of the lyrics. And I think most people who attempt to review this album would probably say the same thing. So while the album cover is meant to be very, you know, garish and immediately just whoa, many of the lyrics on the album can be like that too. I will say maybe some of the themes could have been just a bit tighter. I do think something is to be said about how Billy and Elucid do go off the trail sometimes with their lyrics. There's always so much in what they're saying that it hits the point where you could probably refine it and make it a bit simpler. I think that probably would have turned this album into a great listen and just make it a bit easier to follow, but maybe that's just me. Not that I'm saying that they should just sort of give you instructions on every track and tell you exactly how everything is, but I do think they just have a bit of a tendency to kind of go off the path a little bit and just wander into something else, but still think it's really good. Musically, it's again my favorite that they've done. I think the beats are fantastic across this thing. The rapping is really strong too. The features are pretty good for the most part. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go 7 out of 10. A surprise, a nice surprise. I enjoy this way more than I expected, considering I didn't like Shrines. So it's only a good thing. Hopefully you guys enjoy too. Would love to see what you guys think in the comments. I'm sure you've got lots to say about the lyrics and the themes and everything. Would love to see paragraphs upon paragraphs of your theories and all that kind of stuff. You know, go for it, go for it. I enjoy that kind of thing. I enjoy the discussion. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching. Do have a good day. Hopefully you enjoyed the review as well. If you did, make sure you subscribe. Hit the like as well if you want to. Have a good day and goodbye.